So listen up, behind me is a 12-year-old 991.1 Porsche 911 Carrera S with over 75,000 miles. It's equipped with a 7-speed manual transmission and the last of the 3.8-liter naturally aspirated boxer 6 cylinders. So in this review, I'm going to see how this thing has held up in its 10 plus years of existence and then take it for a quick drive. But before doing so, a big thank you to Porsche of downtown LA for giving me access to this 911. If you happen to be interested in this car or anything else they have in their inventory, you can feel free to reach out directly to me using the comments below or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. Otherwise, you can reach out to the dealer directly yourself using the information I've left in the description below. Just don't forget to mention this video. Now let's get started with this 12-year-old 911 by looking at its design. So check out that beautiful downtown LA skyline, clear blue skies, such a beautiful day here in Southern California. Now let's go ahead and look at this 911. So you know that the 911 has always been an evolution in design, and they mostly all kind of look the same. But with each generation, it's so interesting that there's like this new little wrinkle, and it makes it very different than any other 911 that's come before it. Now, in the 991.1 gen, it was only the third time in the 911's history where it got a new platform. It was basically the beginning of the bigger 911. So now let's take a look at this design. The front end here, even though it's a little different than the 997, it still screams 911 with the circular headlights and some of the introduction of the LED lights there. And this one even has the black Porsche crest. That actually looks like a gray Porsche crest. It's a nice contrast with the black color paint. But it's when you come to the side of the 991 is where you'll notice the biggest difference, and that is with the size of the car. It's longer, both in length and wheelbase. So this is the big difference where you'll see that the 911 has pretty much grown in size. It all started with this generation. But one of the other things to highlight is that unlike the 992 generation, not all of the 991s had a wide body. So for example, this Carrera S still shares the clean and simple narrow hips seen in the base Carrera. In the 991, you had to go to four-wheel drive cars or GTS and GT level to get the wide body. And for some, I know that the narrow, smooth lines are a little more attractive. So because of the growth in size, some people might look at the 991 as the beginning of the end for the real 911s. But for me, I think it's the beginning of the best 911s yet to come. Also remember that the growth in size of the 911 basically allowed the Cayman to become what it's become today. Because if you think about it, everybody was complaining, oh, free the Cayman, give it more power, etc., etc. So Porsche had to kind of move up the 911 so the Cayman can slot up underneath it. And in retrospect, think of the cars it's produced. The Cayman GTS 4.0, the GT4, and even the GT4 RS. So now let me give you a quick overview of the interior before we take this thing out on the road. And the first thing you're going to notice when you come in here is the abundance of buttons. Holy hell, buttons, knobs, switches. Who would have known that you could operate an interior of a car using all of these tactile things? As far as the screens, you've got one in the center stack that basically does all the functional stuff well. Nothing really fancy like PCM stuff that is in the more modern 911s. Then you have a small TFT screen in the 5-pod gauge cluster, and that reads out some info, but that's basically it. Nothing really fancy, again, like the infotainment system. Then the seat itself. Now, I'm not sure if this is a 14-way seat. I'm not sure exactly which configuration it is, but it is a pretty comfortable seat. It's not like the softest, it's not the most comfortable, but it's more than adequate to be driven on a daily basis. And on a 75,000 mile car, it's nicely broken in, so it's really, really nice to sit in. Now, the highlight of this interior, the overarching item, or the characteristic probably is the best word, is the quality. For a 75,000 mile car, this thing looks immaculate. Yes, I know that that also ties to ownership and how they take care of it. But if I remember correctly, this car has had 3 owners, and it looks like this has a full leather interior, and it looks immaculate. Not a scratch, not a ripping of a thread, nothing looks out of place. I mean, you could argue that this looks like a 20,000 mile car interior. That's how good it looks. That's how nice it's kept up. Of course, there's some wear and tear stuff, like the shifter has some chipping on it, but that's easily replaceable and expected for a car that's 12 years old, but looks nothing like a 12-year-old interior. And a testament of that is I haven't heard like a squeak or a rattle when I'm sitting in here, I move it around, or when I was driving, hitting potholes and stuff. No noise, not a squeak or a rattle, nicely screwed together interior. Now, one cool thing, where did I put the key? For this car, look at the key. It's got the Martini livery, very cool looking. Even though the car is not this color, I'm sure underneath this it's a black plastic key, but first time I've seen this. Pretty cool looking. All right, now that that's all out of the way, let's go ahead and see how this thing performs behind the wheel. I've got this thing fired up. Let me rattle off some specs before we go for a drive. So 3.8 liter naturally aspirated boxer 6, 400 horsepower, 325 pounds-feet of torque. You had 2 choices of transmissions, PDK or 7-speed manual. And remember, this was the first time you could get a 7-speed manual in a Porsche 911. As a matter of fact, I think that the 911 was the first sports car ever, or maybe even the first car ever to get a 7-speed manual transmission. If I remember correctly, the 911 did it, and then the Corvette did it in the 7th generation when that came out, I believe, in 2014. And then it's putting power out to the rear wheels. Of course, you can get it in 4-wheel drive. And this car is riding on 20-inch wheels. It is on Michelin Pilot 4S tires, so these are aftermarket. They're running 305s in the rear, 245s in the front, if I remember correctly. So it might make a difference in some of the character or handling characteristics compared to what this car felt like when it was stock. Newer modern tires make a big difference on cars that are a little older. So I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and this car does not have Sport Chrono. It also does not have the sports exhaust system. So this is a pretty bare bones 911 as far as mechanically. It seems like an enthusiast spec with the 7-speed manual and pretty much nothing else. So let's see what it drives like, shall we? Let's release the parking brake, put it in first, and let's roll. So when I first got in this thing, I was like, man, this feels like such a smaller car compared to the 992. And of course, the 911s continue to grow, but that's not important right now. I'm going to get a straight stretch of road. I'm putting this in sport. I'm also putting the chassis or PASM in the stiffer setting in sport. Turn here. Let's see what naturally aspirated 3.8 liters of goodness sounds like. Oh yeah, the howl. Oh yeah. 7,800 RPM redline. Oh yes. This feels so good. There's a lot of traffic in front of me right now, but this is a wonderful, wonderful car in terms of speed and feel. Let me rev match downshift into first here. Turn. Let's get another little pull. Oh yeah, so satisfying and rewarding. Driving the manual and that 3.8 liter engine screaming up to 7,800 RPM right behind your ear is just a wonderful, wonderful experience. I mean, people always knock old cars, but these 911s with these manual transmissions and the naturally aspirated 3.8 liter boxer, they're just so fun to drive. And the Porsche howl from a naturally aspirated engine is just so unique and different. And frankly, I miss it. When I drive the twin turbocharged motors in the 992, this is a very nostalgic and fun experience to get behind the wheel of one of these cars. So let me give you some more perspective here. So this is a very quick car. I believe Porsche said 0 to 60 is 4 seconds in this when it first came out. That was in the PDK. The manual is 4.3 seconds. And who cares? This thing feels so wonderful. And revving it out to 7,800 is just a unbelievable experience. So from a speed standpoint, this thing is properly fast, and Porsche, notorious to sandbagging their acceleration numbers, 4.3 seconds, this is more than enough. And as a driver's car, I think this is right along the lines of accessibility, that you can punch it even here on the street, and it's not just gonna scare the crap. Somebody is really just going crazy over there. It's not going to scare the crap out of you. It's accessible. Now, let me talk about some of the other things. The shifter is magnificent. Whether you're driving slow or whether you're driving fast, the feel is great. The shifter feel is okay. The clutch pedal is a little better. It does have a little bit of a kick that it's just there. It doesn't really impact the shift much. I was able to get in and shift very smoothly. I was able to notice where the grab point is of the clutch very, very easily. And there isn't a lot of learning curve. And Porsche, with their manual transmissions, are very, very good. And it's no different here with this 991. I'm not sure if there's any clutch modifications or anything like that done with the shifter. But the way this thing feels right now, very nice. So next, let's talk about electronic power steering, because this is a very controversial topic in the 991 generation, because this was the first gen where they switched to electronic power steering. Now, I'm going to tell you this, that it's not as bad, or it's overblown, at least in my opinion. It feels great. It still feels like a proper sports car. You give it any type of input and it moves, and there's no deadness, there's no vagueness. It's what you want in a sports car, and I'm not sure what people complain about. Yes, you could say that maybe it needs a little bit more feel. It doesn't have as much feel as a hydraulic system, but I think that's a little I don't know, not in line with the expectations of an EPS, especially an early generation one like this. But one of the great things that Porsche did in switching to EPS is they did it early. So this was the first time they switched onto it, and it allowed them to iterate, make it better. So does this thing get your blood pumping? Is this something that I would recommend? Absolutely. This is very much aligned with what I like in a sports car. Manual transmission, naturally aspirated engine, high revving rear wheel drive. This checks all of those boxes. And for $60,000, I believe this is $60,000 or $65,000 Porsche Downtown LA wants for it. I mean, it's kind of a bargain, because when you think about this configuration, 6-speed or manual transmission, naturally aspirated Porsches, These are becoming very sought after and very highly regarded, desirable cars. Think 911 ST, think 911R, GT3 Touring, GT3. These cars are desirable, and one starts to wonder, am I ever going to be able to afford these things nowadays? Because markups, things like that, and even in the used car market, they're still very expensive. But here you are, you've got a lot of the same formula that is more daily driver friendly. The naturally aspirated engine, manual transmission, true sports car experience. I mean, for anybody who's interested in something like this, I highly recommend it. Go out, give it a drive. I don't think you will be disappointed. This is a fantastic experience in a sports car and a very nostalgic 911 experience as well. So that's it for driving. Now let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. So that's the 991 911, a very special car, and a car that laid the groundwork out for all of the unbelievable 911s that have come after it. Now, Porsche, in my opinion, was a great car company, but it seems like they've now taken it to an entirely different level with cars like the GT3, the GT3 Touring, the GT3 RS, the 911R, all of those fabulous Caymans that I mentioned with the 4-liter engine, and of course, let's not forget the latest 911 ST. God, I want one of those things so badly. Obviously, they're way too expensive and very limited, but nonetheless, all of these cars are very, very desirable and unbelievable cars. And you could argue that the 991 paved the way for all of them. Now, that's all I've got. Another big thank you to Porsche of downtown LA for access to this 911. If you have any questions, please make sure you leave me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.